Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we are getting into something really important for anyone involved with USA fencing, their complaint and hearing procedures.
Right, and let's face it, these kinds of rules can seem, well, pretty daunting.
Definitely. A bit like a complex APA bout sometimes, but knowing how they work, that's crucial for all members.
Absolutely. So our aim today is really to unpack the key bits, bring some clarity, hopefully make things a little easier to grasp.
And we should mention, all this info comes straight from the source, the official USA Fencing Athlete Handbook for 2024-25.
That's right, we're going by the book. And just as context, remember USA Fencing, or USFA, is the main governing body for amateur fencing here in the U.S.
Recognized by the international body, the FIE, and the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Committee, too.
Exactly, they set the standards.
Now, before we jump right in, we want to give a quick shout out to Fencing Family. They're an Etsy shop based in LA.
Ah, yes, they've got some great fencing-themed apparel, accessories, that sort of thing.
You can check them out online at fencingfamily.etsy.com. Definitely worth a look.
Good stuff.
Okay, so let's parry riposte into this. These complaint and hearing procedures, where do they actually apply? What kind of issues fall under the system?
Good question. So these procedures are specifically for complaints filed directly with USA Fencing, and crucially, they have to fall under the jurisdiction of the Grievance and Disciplinary Committee.
Jurisdiction, so like their area of authority.
Precisely. It's about what types of complaints this specific committee is empowered to handle. And, by becoming a USFA member or even just participating in a sanctioned event, you're agreeing to abide by these procedures.
So it's part of the deal when you join or compete.
It is. The committee's power comes directly from the USA Fencing bylaws, their official policies, rules, and just their general practices.
Okay, so what kinds of things does this committee deal with then? What's in their wheelhouse?
They're set up to adjudicate cases where someone alleges a violation of those bylaws, policies, or rules we just mentioned. Or if there's conduct alleged that's considered detrimental to USA Fencing as an organization. And they also handle formal grievances brought by members.
Are there things they don't handle, limits to their power?
Yes, definitely. It's important to know what's not covered. The main one is any dispute that falls under USA Fencing's specific black card policy.
Ah, so black card issues have their own separate track.
Exactly. That's a different process altogether. This committee doesn't touch those.
Right. So let's say a member has an issue that does fit under this committee's jurisdiction. How do they actually start the process? What's step one?
Okay, step one is filing a formal complaint. And there are some key things it absolutely must include.
Like what? What info is needed?
First off, a clear, concise statement. It needs to explain the alleged violation or the grievance itself, what actually happened.
Be specific.
Very specific. And if you can, you should identify the particular policy or rule you believe was broken. It really helps focus the review.
Makes sense. What else?
It needs to be signed by the complainant, or if they're a minor, by their parent or guardian. Signing basically attests that, to the best of your knowledge, what you're saying is true.
Okay. Verification?
And contact information. You need a phone number and either a physical address or an email. Enough for them to reach you.
And should you say what you want to happen, the outcome you're looking for?
Yes, you should state the relief you're seeking. But, and this is important, that statement doesn't limit what the hearing panel might ultimately decide. It's just your initial request.
Got it. Anything else to include?
You need to attach any supporting documents or materials you have right at the start. Evidence, basically. And if the complaint is about being denied a chance to compete, you should also explain any steps you already took to try and sort it out.
Okay. Can someone file a complaint, like, anonymously? Or can USA Fencing itself file one?
Yes, to both, actually. Complaints can be filed anonymously, and USA Fencing can initiate a complaint itself.
Interesting. How does that work if USFA files?
The chair of the board of directors can designate someone to act as the official representative for that complaint.
And deadlines. Are there time limits?
Ah, crucial point, yes.
Yeah.
There might be specific time limits mentioned in other USA Fencing rules. You absolutely need to file within those limits, or the complaint might not be considered.
Right. Don't wait too long. So the complaint is filed correctly. What happens then? Who looks at it first?
It goes for an initial review. This is done by the Manager of Compliance and Athlete Safety at USA Fencing.
Okay, what's their job at this stage?
They basically act as a gatekeeper. They review the complaint to see if it states a potential violation or issue that falls under these procedures and warrants moving forward. It's a first check for relevance and completeness.
And what can they decide? What are the possible outcomes?
Well, they can accept it. meaning it moves to the next stage. Or they could dismiss it,
Why would it be dismissed?
usually because it doesn't fall under the committee's jurisdiction. Maybe it's a black card issue, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
Or perhaps the complaint itself didn't meet the filing requirements we just talked about. Not enough detail, missing signature, things like that.
Okay. If it is accepted, what happens to the person the complaint is about? The respondent.
If it's accepted, both the person who filed it, the complainant, and the respondent get notified.
And the respondent has to reply.
Yes, they have an obligation to file a written response to the allegations. Typically, they get 21 days, though extensions are sometimes possible.
What if they just don't respond?
Failure to respond is automatically treated as a denial of all the allegations in the complaint.
I see. So, okay, complaint accepted, response filed, or not. What's the big next step?
The formation of a hearing panel. This is really the core of the adjudication process.
Who forms this panel?
Once the complaint is officially accepted, the chair of the Grievance and Disciplinary Committee assigns the case to a panel. It consists of 3 impartial individuals.
Impartiality sounds absolutely vital.
It is. And there are specific rules about who can be on this panel.
Like what?
Well, a big one, required by the USOPC bylaws, is that at least one member must be an athlete.
An athlete representative.
Correct. And they're appointed specifically by the chair of the USFA Athlete Council.
Do panel members have to be on the main grievance committee or be independent?
Not necessarily. They can be members of the committee, but they don't have to be. Same goes for being technically independent under the bylaws. The absolute must-have is impartiality. No conflicts of interest, not even the appearance of one.
What if someone involved thinks there's a conflict? Can they object to a panel member?
Yes, there's a process for that.
Yeah.
Within 7 days of being appointed, panel members have to disclose any known conflicts or situations that might look like a conflict.
Okay.
Then the parties complainant and respondent are told who's on the panel. If either party objects, they can challenge a member.
Who decides the objection is valid?
The Grievance and Disciplinary Committee itself reviews the challenge, obviously, without the person being challenged participating in that decision.
Right.
If the committee agrees there is a conflict, or even a reasonable appearance of one, that member is replaced to ensure the panel is fair.
It sounds like a robust system for fairness. What about protecting people involved, like preventing someone from getting back the person who filed the complaint?
Anti-retaliation. That's a huge emphasis. USA fencing strictly prohibits any form of retaliation against anyone who files a complaint or participates in the process in any way.
How broad is that? What counts as retaliation?
It's defined very broadly. Basically, any adverse action or even the threat of one. Things like being kicked out of training, getting less coaching, losing access to resources like housing or meals, being dropped from a competition roster,
Wow, okay.
or any kind of harassment or abuse that stems from their participation in the complaint process.
Who is protected by this?
The policy calls them protected individuals. It includes athletes, obviously, but also coaches, trainers, managers, officials, even people just serving as witnesses. Anyone involved, really.
And retaliation is a serious violation itself.
Absolutely. It's a violation of USA fencing rules and can lead to its own sanctions.
What about trying to mess with the proceedings themselves, like trying to influence witnesses or the panel?
Also strictly forbidden. You cannot interfere by intimidating anyone involved, parties, witnesses, panel members, committee members, none of that.
Trying to sway the outcome is out.
Completely. The goal is to stop anyone from hindering or altering someone's ability to participate freely and, deliberately delaying or disrupting the process without a good reason. That's also a violation.
Okay, so the hearing panel makes a decision. Is that the end of the road? Or can you appeal?
There is an appeal process, yes. Decisions made by the hearing panel and even the initial dismissal of a complaint by the manager can be appealed. It adds another layer of review.
Who handles the appeals?
Typically, appeals go to the USA Fencing Board of Directors. Or, in certain cases required by law or bylaws, like under the Ted Stevens Act, it might go to a neutral third-party arbitration provider designated by the USOPC.
If it goes to the board, do they rehear the whole case? Look at all the evidence again?
No, not usually. The standard they use is similar to how courts review decisions by administrative agencies, think state law, in this case Colorado's.
So what does that mean practically?
It means they don't conduct a whole new hearing, what's called de novo. They review the process the hearing panel followed. Did they follow the rules? Was their decision reasonable based on the evidence presented to them?
So it's more about reviewing the process and the reasonableness of the outcome.
Exactly. And one more point on this. Generally, to satisfy USOPC rules about exhausting your options, you need to have gone through this USA Fencing Committee process first before taking further action elsewhere.
Got it. Now, the handbook also talks about expedited grievance steps. These sound like they're for specific urgent situations.
Yes, precisely. These are designed for situations that pop up after a team has already assembled for travel or competition, specifically outside the U.S.
What kind of situations trigger these expedited steps?
A few specific ones. If a fencer or staff member contests being removed from the team roster,
Okay.
or if they believe they were wrongly denied a spot based on the selection criteria, or if they feel USA Fencing is improperly stopping them from competing.
Uh-huh.
And finally, if they're facing potential disciplinary action from USA Fencing right then and there, even if the original issue happened earlier.
So really time-sensitive issues when a team is already deployed internationally.
That's the idea. But quick caveat, if the action is being taken by the USOPC itself, their own procedures apply, not these USA Fencing ones.
And who pays for this expedited process if you need a lawyer, for example?
The fencer or the staff member involved is responsible for all their own expenses, including any legal counsel fees.
What's the appeal route within this faster process?
Well, you can ask the USA Fencing Committee responsible for team selections to review a decision made by what's called the team panel. That's the initial expedited hearing body.
Okay.
You can also ask the USA Fencing Board of Directors or their designee to overrule either the team panel or the selection committee. But, and this is a big but,
Uh-oh. What's the catch?
it all depends on time. If there literally isn't enough time for the higher body to review and act before, say, the competition happens or the team moves on, then the lower decision stands as final for USA Fencing purposes.
So speed is absolutely critical. What's the actual team panel hearing like?
The team leader sets it up, tells the affected person the issues, the time, place, format. It could be in person, phone, whatever works.
And a hearing itself.
The panel hold it. They can pause it if they need more info or witnesses. The fencer should, if possible, get copies of written info beforehand. Importantly, strict legal rules of evidence don't apply.
What rights does the fencer have during this hearing?
Several key rights. They can be there in person, have a lawyer represent them, question witnesses against them, present their own evidence, testify themselves or stay silent, and address the panel directly or through their rep.
Sounds like basic due process, just faster. What comes out of it?
The team panel writes a report with findings and recommendations as quickly as possible. It goes to the USA Fencing Executive Director, who shares it with the fencer, any other affected athlete, and the selection committee.
And the panel's decision takes effect immediately.
Usually, yes. Unless a higher body within USA Fencing steps in and puts a hold on it again, if there's time. Missing deadlines in this expedited process generally won't overturn things unless there are really weird circumstances.
Does this expedited process prevent someone from using other avenues later, like USOPC bylaws or arbitration?
No, it doesn't prevent them from pursuing those rights, if applicable.
Okay, moving on slightly. There are also national team disciplinary procedures for on-site issues. When do these kick in?
These are specifically for alleged violations of the USA Fencing Code of Conduct that happened during a national team activity, like at a training camp or competition.
And like the expedited grievances, they can happen right there on site.
Yes, a disciplinary panel can be convened immediately at the location to deal with the alleged breach quickly.
Who makes up this on-site disciplinary panel?
Assuming they're present and have no conflicts, it's usually the chief of mission, the team captain, the team leader manager, a team coach who doesn't coach anyone involved in the incident, and an adult fencer over 18. It's meant to be a mix of roles.
And the hearing process for this, is it similar to the team panel?
Broadly similar in terms of rights. The highest-ranking staff member present sets it up. The accused person gets due process, right to be present, have representation, confront witnesses, call their own witnesses, and address the panel.
What happens after the hearing?
The panel writes a report, charges, findings, actions taken or recommended, and sends it up the chain to the Director of Sports Performance, the relevant national weapon head coach, and an athlete advisory council rep.
What kind of discipline can this panel actually impose right there?
They can impose things like loss of privileges, pulling someone from the day's fencing, or the whole event, sending them home.
Pretty serious consequences.
Yes. They can also require the person to cover costs for damages they caused, for example. And they can recommend further sanctions to be considered after the event.
What if it's too complex to sort out completely on-site?
If it needs more follow-up, the Director of Sports Performance, head coach, and athlete rep can review the panel's report. They might impose more sanctions themselves, or they could refer the whole thing to the USA Fencing Board for a deeper look and potential action later.
Who bears the cost of these disciplinary proceedings?
Generally, the individual being disciplined is responsible for the costs of the proceeding itself and any reasonable expenses USA Fencing incurred because of the incident.
And is there an appeal from this on-site disciplinary decision?
Yes. The individual can appeal within 15 days of being notified of the decision, which might even be verbal at the hearing.
Who hears the appeal?
They can appeal to that same group, director of sports performance, head coach, athlete rep, or they can choose to appeal directly to the board of directors or their designee. An appeal panel is then appointed to make a final decision quickly.
Okay, one last procedure mentioned is the National Team Dispute Resolution. This sounds specific to coaches and athletes.
It is. This one is tailored to manage conflicts and hopefully improve relationships between national team fencers, their national coaches, and USA fencing staff.
What's the scope? What kinds of disputes does it cover?
It's for complaints by an aggrieved party, usually a fencer, against a national coach. But, and this is key, it has to relate specifically to the coach's role and duties performed on behalf of USA Fencing in international contexts.
So not about their private club coaching or anything like that?
Exactly. Not private coaching, not club admin, not just general member duties. It has to be about their official national coach role for USA Fencing internationally.
Can you give some examples of issues that would fit?
Sure. Things like potential conflicts of interest for the coach in their national role, how they allocate coaching resources at international events, athlete selection for tournaments, decisions about training camp logistics,
Okay.
also requirements the coach places on athletes, management of USA Fencing funds by the coach, how they delegate duties, or just their general conduct as a national coach internationally.
So if a fencer has a concern like that, how do they start this specific process?
They need to submit a formal written complaint. It should clearly outline the issue, and it goes directly to the director of sports performance at USA Fencing.
That written complaint kicks it off. What does the director do with it?
The director reviews it first. They need to decide if the complaint seems to have merit, if it meets the requirements, and if it actually falls under this specific procedure.
Do they investigate at this stage?
They might make some reasonable initial inquiries to help them decide if it should move forward.
What if they decide it doesn't have merit or doesn't fit the procedure?
If they conclude it lacks merit or is deficient somehow, they'll let the person who filed it know in writing, usually within about 2 weeks.
Wow, that was a lot of procedural ground to cover. It's clear USA Fencing has put a lot of thought into structuring these different processes.
It is quite detailed, yes. And honestly, having a good grasp of how these procedures work, which one applies when, what the steps are, it's really essential for everyone. It helps create a fairer, more accountable environment within the sport.
Absolutely. And if listeners want to really dig into the fine print, where should they go?
The best place is always the source, the full USA Fencing Athlete Handbook. We really encourage you to download it from the USA Fencing website and review the complete sections. All the nuances are there.
Knowing this stuff definitely empowers you as a fencer, coach, parent, official, whatever your role in the community is. It helps ensure things are handled properly.
It really does.
So maybe a final thought to leave you with. How do you think a clearer, wider understanding of these complaint and hearing procedures could contribute to making the fencing environment even more transparent and accountable overall?
That's a really good question to ponder. Something for everyone involved in the sport to think about.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into a complex but critical aspect of USA fencing.